So he has asked that when you give your prayer requests that you look towards him and you speak loudly because he has a harder time hearing in the back. So what prayer requests do we have this week?
I got to pray.
Praise? That you're praying today?
Grandson number 2, grandchild number 8 showed up Monday night.
Awesome.
Daniel, 7 pounds 4 ounces. So we're just all like delighted and good luck.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a friend, Nomi, who has kidney stones, and so far they're just hanging in, causing great pain.
Who was it?
Nomi.
No.
N-O-E-M-I.
Nomi with kidney stones. Yeah, Tammy.
My dad was put on hospice yesterday, and my mom's in the hospital most of the week. She's home now, but I was there.
So her dad's was put in hospice, and her mother's in the hospital.
She's in hospice at home.
Okay. Oh, okay, at home.
He is.
Okay. So we need to pray for Tammy because she's got a lot on her plate right now. Other prayer requests or praises?
We had 4 volleyball games this week, so we got to see our principal. Her daughter plays on Shannon's team as well. It was an infusion week, so she was getting her treatments and then coming to the games and kind of just sitting off to it by herself. But just really, really weak. She said next week on Friday we actually start school. Like teachers have to be at school. I'm not sure how much she's gonna be able to be there the next 2 weeks or 2 to 4 weeks, but just praise that everything's going well. But prayer request for just strength for her as she gets started. Her name's Gina.
Anyone else?
Pray for Eddie. He wrenched his knee.
Eddie Stambaugh,
Not able to walk.
the knee issue.
And I'll just say again, and I'm sure George would second, continue to pray for Bob. Just because he's away, he's in a real mission field where he's at and talking with his coworkers and so forth. He's got a lot of people who just don't see Christ, the gospel, God, and just pray for him that God gives him the right words at the right time as he's talking with his coworkers.
Yeah, Tammy.
My daughter's best friend from school, her name's Stephanie Whitesel, is having a tumor removed from her head on Thursday.
Oh, Stephanie's having surgery to have a tumor removed from her head. And we need to remember Hayden and Gally. They got married yesterday. It was a really nice ceremony, and I think they're looking forward to getting away for a week or so. But it was a very nice ceremony. So keep them in your prayers. Any other requests?
Brad's Aunt Judy died yesterday too, Judy Blevins.
Okay. So Brad's Aunt Judy died, Judy Blevins, yesterday. A lot going on in your family. All right, Kurt, you want to lead us in prayer?
Lord, we just thank you again for a day to be able to set aside all the things that distract us on our regular days, make you a priority as we start the week, to get together, to fellowship, to share what you're doing in our lives, to listen to your word, and start the week off on the right foot. Lord, we pray for all these things that have been mentioned and some that even haven't. We thank you for the men who were here yesterday for the prayer breakfast and for your men's ministry. We just thank you for the men who had a heart for doing that and getting that thank you so much for the safe delivery for Mackenzie and for Jackson's safe arrival. Continue to pray for Bob as he's out there in Massachusetts working with people who really just don't know you. Pray that you would really use him in a way to change some people's lives, people who are looking or feeling empty but not even looking and don't see you, and some who don't even care or want to see you. And Lord, that's so frustrating to know that you know the answer and people don't even want to ask the question. Just encourage him and give him wisdom as he works there. For Noemi and her kidney stones that she's dealing with, Lord, we just pray that you would comfort her, help this to resolve quickly without too much difficulty and pain. Kid's dad who's in hospice, we just pray that you would really put your arms around that entire family. We know that that's a difficult time to go through, and it's just, it can be very lonely even when you're surrounded with people. And we just pray that you would encourage everyone in that family and give them wisdom as they move forward on that. For Gina and for her recovery and for just getting her strength back and being able to get back involved in her daily activities. Thank you that the Odies are able to interact and be around and encourage. Lord, for Eddie and for this injury that he had with his knee, we just pray that you would help him to recover really quickly from that. Stephanie, who's upcoming with surgery. For Hayden and Gally, we thank you so much. We praise you for not only his ministry here at the church and for the ways that he's already contributing, but for this new relationship that they're building. We just really pray that you would bless that. Help us to come alongside and encourage and to be as much of a ministry to him as he's being to us and to Gally. For Brett and that family and Aunt Judy passing, Lord, again, that entire family, we just really pray that you would encourage them and support them through a lot of these difficulties that they're going through and some tough times. Lord, we just know that you are our present help. And whether it's rebuilding walls, whether it's a family that's been taken away from us, and like Job, we just sit there wondering, like, what is going on to us? Remembering to look to you and to find our strength in you and to make you a priority. And as we talk through this Sunday school class this morning, that it is you that has got to be our number one priority, because otherwise everything will just distract us and pull us away and tear down our relationship with you. We have an enemy who wants to infiltrate and seduce and tear down and destroy in every way he possibly can, and we need to be alert to that. We just take today especially to focus and remind ourselves that you've got to be the center of our life. We've got to make you the source of everything that we are aiming at trying to do. We thank you for the leaders in this church, Don and for Pastor and for everybody else who is so involved in helping us stay focused that way. We pray all these things in your name. Amen.
All right, we're in chapter 5 in our book. We're about halfway through that chapter, and it is the Learning from a Rich Fool is the title. So we'll kind of pick up in Luke 12 and 15. It says, "And he said to them, 'Take heed and beware of covetousness.'" Again, we've talked about this a lot. "For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." What's that mean? One's life does not consist of the abundance of the things he possesses. I'm going to make you talk. I'm going to ask you questions if you don't answer. Yeah.
You can't measure your personal value.
Right.
Value of the things you own.
Right. Be careful how we measure ourselves, right? We shouldn't measure by our possessions, okay? James 1, 9 through 11 says, let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he will pass away. For no sooner has the sun risen with a burning heat than it withers the grass, its flowers fall, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits. So verse 10 tells us that the rich man should glory, right? The prior verse talks about glory in his humiliation, right? So if you are blessed with riches, you should be a humble person, right? That should be the measuring stick, is how humble are you, right? Are you driven through humiliation? And the reason that we should be is because we're going to pass away, right? We're going to fade away. We're going to die, right? And we'll talk more as we go about taking it with us or not being able to take it with us, right? So what are you going to do with it? So it says, do we strive for abundance, right? So think about that. Abundance is having a very large quantity or supply of something that is more than enough. So do we strive to have more than enough in our life? Is that what drives us? And then how do you measure what's enough? What should be the measurement of what's enough for us?
I think an application to this, and talking about finances and money, it is good to have a supply of money, like as a fund, in case something happens.
Sure.
3 months, 4 months of money set aside. But to identify yourself in that and like have a large quantity because you want to have it, and like that's the wrong attitude to have, and it's the wrong way to approach it. An abundance of stuff or things and possessions is very obviously wrong and different than having money set aside for a fund.
What's the danger of having an abundance?
Depend upon that abundance for happiness.
We depend on ourselves, right?
I'm amazed that the advertising is on now. At one time, when cable TV came out, the thing about it was no advertising. Now all of a sudden, it's not where we are right now. 50% or 50% of the program. is
Sure.
advertising, and it's making you dissatisfied with what you have and you need more.
Right. No, the advertising is crazy. We watch the world news usually every night, and we watch 20 minutes of it, because if you watch it, the last 10 minutes is about 8 minutes of commercials, right? They almost give you a teaser, and then they go to commercial, and then they come back, and, you know, it's a 30-second story, and then they go to another commercial. So, you know, that's where the world's at. But the danger of having an abundance is that we start relying on ourselves, and we stop relying on God, right?
There's something else that I've started learning is that when I am able to say, you know what, it's God's. I don't need to strive, work hard to collect. As soon as I do that, it becomes free, easier for me to use that to serve.
Right.
I'm not collecting it for myself anymore. Now I'm free to let God say, help that person, reach out, give, contribute, do something with it
Yep.
that I want you to do with it.
Yeah, right. And again, if we approach it that it's you know, it's not our money, it's God's money, what would God want us to do with it? When we think of it in that context, it's going to drive us to the right decisions. It says, do we strive for more than we need? And, you know, it's interesting when you have a conversation with somebody and they're talking about something they want to purchase or whatever, and you put it in the framework of, is that a want or is that a need, right? And again, God will take care of the needs. We got to be careful of chasing all of our wants. And again, you know, if you can afford it, God bless you, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But make good decisions, Matthew 16:26 says, for what profit is it, and you're probably very aware of this verse, for what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? And think about that. If you had to give something to get salvation, to what extent would people go to be able to get it? Right? But we can't buy salvation. What it's telling us is we can gain everything. If we're not part of the kingdom, we're not part of God's kingdom, and that's not a focus in our life, then it's not worth anything. All right, so in Romans, there's 7 churches it talks about. In the church of Smyrna, it was known as the persecuted church. And it says, I know your works, tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich. What's that mean?
It means that their wealth was not found in earthly things, but they were rich in the fact that they were close to God.
In godly things, right? They had the right focus. They had the right priorities in their life, in their church, right? Even though, they weren't rich by worldly standards, they were rich by godly standards. And then the church of Laodicea, known as the lukewarm church, says, because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, in need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. So what's the attitude of this church?
They can take care of themselves.
We got it made, right? We got it. We don't need any help. We don't need anything. It says we have need of nothing. And God's response to them is you're wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, right? So again, it's what lens are you looking through to make those judgments? So what money can't do, if you can help me out with some verses here. Who wants to take the first one? Denise. Second one? Mark. Third one, Proverbs 17:1, Amy. Psalms 37:16, Dan. Erica, you want to do Proverbs 19:6? And then Barry, Proverbs 22:1. Yep.
Proverbs 15, 16, 17. Better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith.
So what's this telling us?
Better to have little but have the Lord than have abundance of other things.
Right. And that second verse talks about a feast with fighting or strife, right? So many times we think we have it because our focus is wrong, so there's strife in our life, right? And this is saying, give up the strife. You don't need the big fancy dinner, right? Just relax and enjoy what God's given you, and you'll be happier. You'll be more content, right? The next one, Proverbs 16:8.
Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice.
Okay, what's this mean? What's the end of that say, Mark? Read it again.
Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice.
Okay, so what it's saying is that if you have injustice in your life, right, if you're not doing the right things and you're wealthy, you're better off to be poor, right? Next verse.
Better is a dry morsel in quietness therewith than a house full of sacrifices with strife.
Okay, again, it's talking about strife, right? It says, better is a dry morsel. What's it say? So what's that mean? Have you ever been in a situation where like there's a big celebration? What's usually going on? Mass chaos. It's noisy, isn't it? There's chaos. It's like sometimes you can't even think, right? And this is telling us that we're better off in quietness, right? And why is that?
Because the distractions from the Lord.
Correct. When we're in quietness, it's easier to focus where we should focus, right? Psalms 37:16.
A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked.
Okay, so when you think about giving back, right, in that context, what's this telling us? That if you have a little and you're willing to give it up, it's much better than if you have a lot and you want to keep it, right? And then Proverbs 19:6.
Many entreat the favor of the nobility, and every man is a friend to one who gives gifts.
Okay, so we always talk about how we value friendships or how we invest in people. And what's that say at the end, Erica?
Every man is a friend to one who gives gifts.
Every man is a friend to one who gives gifts. What's that mean?
You're going to be real popular
Right,
if you're just out there handing stuff out.
right. People are going to want to be around you if they think they can what? Get something from you, right? And then Proverbs 22:1.
A good name is to be chosen rather than good riches, and favor is better than silver and gold.
Okay, so what's a good name mean in this verse? A good reputation, right? So what's this telling us? That a good reputation is better than what? Riches, right? So those are things money can't buy. Money can't buy you a good reputation. How do you gain a reputation, good or bad? Right, things you say, things you do, right? People watch you, and they're going to make a judgment on you, fair or unfair. That's what's going to happen.
I think it's important that it could take a lifetime to build a good reputation, but
A day to destroy it, right? Right, and we need to think about that. Okay, Acts 8:18-20. So Simon, there was a group of people who were just baptized. Simon was just baptized. It says, and when Simon saw that through the laying on of the hands of the apostles' hands, the Holy Spirit was given, he offered them money, saying, "Give me this power also, that anyone on whom I lay hands may receive the Holy Spirit." So what's he saying here? I want to buy this power. I want to buy this power of being able to lay my hands on somebody and give them the Holy Spirit. And then Peter's response is, your money perished with you because you thought that the gift of God could be purchased with money. So it doesn't matter how much money we have. We can't purchase the gifts that God has for us. Romans 12:10 says, be kindly affectionate one towards another with brotherly love, in honor giving preference to one another. It doesn't say just giving preference to one another. What should our attitude be towards it? What's it mean in honor? A joy, being respectful, right? That's the way we should treat other people, right? Philippians 2:3 says, let nothing be done through self-ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves, right? What is self-ambition? Pride, right? I want to do it for me, for myself, right? says that's not what we should, how we should do things, but we should do it in what state of mind? Lowliness, what's that mean? Humble, right? We should be humble. And then it goes on and says, let each esteem others better than himself, right? So what's that mean? If you esteem someone else more than you do yourself, you're going to give them preference, right? You're going to put their needs in front of your needs. Is that easy to do? It's pretty hard, isn't it? When we moved to Columbus, I had taken a job down there, and I was on a quarterly bonus, right? And we were just recovering from having lost the business and everything, so we're starting over, right? And the first quarterly bonus is coming, and it was like $2,600 take home. And we were attending Linworth Baptist Church, and we had gotten to know another couple there. They were about 10 years older than us. He had been a pastor. They had gone through a lot of difficult things in their life. And we were having dinner with them at their house and just talking about how things are going. And, you know, they didn't know I was expecting that bonus, right? And they said, well, things are pretty rough right now. We're behind on our house payment. We're looking at possible foreclosure, and, they're going to shut our utilities off. And, Shelley and I had talked about what we were going to do with that money, right? We were the home we were in, there were some things we wanted to do. And, it was, do we give it to them, right? Because they have a greater need than we do, or do we keep it and use it? And that's what this is talking about, right? I'll let you think about what we did. So, it says we should be a blessing, right, to others. 2 Corinthians 9:8 says, and God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work, right? So what's it mean we'll have a sufficiency in all things? Pretty simple. God will provide for us, right? If we have an abundance, why has he given it to us? So that we can do good works with it. It's not for our own consumption, right? It says that you may have an abundance for every good work. Yeah.
I was going to say, in response to that story that you told, it's interesting how God will bring those decision points at a place where you're like, okay, now what? And he's testing your faith.
Absolutely.
To see how much do you really trust me? Because I know it's easy to give away when you know you've got abundance.
Right.
Right? So that widow who gave her last two mites, I mean, not only did she give up everything she had, but she also had nobody else.
Yep.
She was a widow. She had nobody else she could rely on to say, they're going to step in for me. The only person that she could turn to say, you got my tomorrow, was God. And yet she's giving away the last that she's got. When I do my mom's taxes, I like, how much are you giving away? You've given away like half of your income.
Yeah.
And she's like, Kurt, God's taking care of me.
Right.
I have never lacked for anything.
Yeah.
I'm able to give it. Why not?
Yeah, it is interesting how God puts you in a certain circumstance at a given time. About 8 years ago, we were looking for a Nintendo Switch for Kylie for Christmas, and they were all sold out. So I thought, I'm going to go to GameStop in Elyria because they sell used ones. And prior to that, it was a Saturday. Our envelope system, right? we always write a check every month for groceries, and we would use cash for groceries. So I'd stopped at the bank and wrote a check out for $800 and had that cash with me. And I went to GameStop, and I went in, and there was a lady there, a younger lady, and she was crying. And she kind of walked over by herself, and I went and talked to her, and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Oh, we can't make our rent, so I'm trying to sell some of my kids' games and stuff, and to be able to make rent. But they don't want to buy them." And she was like beside herself. And I said, "Well, how much is your rent?" And she said, $800. And I'm like, right? And I'm like, what are the odds, right? So I walked out to my car, and of course, I went home, and my wife said, "Where's my grocery money?" It says God blesses us so we can be a blessing to others. Whether we are rich or poor, God expects us to serve him by serving others. So he doesn't just expect the rich to serve, he expects all of us to serve, right? There's different ways we can give. So would you define yourself as generous? Don't answer this out loud, right? But I want you to think about it, right? But really the key question is, would others consider you generous? Right? So just kind of, again, think about how others would describe you in this area of giving. It says, do we use what God has blessed us with to be a blessing? Do others consider us a blessing? Right? So if we walked up to people that know you, what would they say about you? Right? How would they define you? And that should matter to us. All right, getting into chapter 6. So one of the things in my life, or maybe it's just the way I'm wired, is that I generally learn more from my mistakes than I do from my accomplishments, right? Maybe it's just because I make a lot more mistakes than I do the right thing, right? So looking at the rich fool, I wanted to just take a minute and see what we could learn. Was there anything there that we can draw from, right? And I think one of the things was the approach he took, right? He didn't make the right decisions, but he actually had a pretty sound approach, okay? So the first was not being wasteful, right? So don't indulge yourself and spend what you cannot afford, right? So are you avoiding impulse buying? This is kind of an application section, right? And I want you to think about that. Do you avoid impulse buying? Who works in the consumer goods area or grocery area, right? Why do you put stuff up by the checkout area? What's that called? Impulse items, right? And you put them there because people walk by them and they're like, "Ooh, oh, wait, I need one of those," right? It happens all the time. And when you do online shopping now, what happens if you search on Amazon for a new pair of shoes? Every time you go to something, a little ad pops up on the side for what? Shoes, right? It's about that impulse. We're going to keep pounding you until we get you to make that purchase, right? So do you avoid those things?
I went into Giant Eagle one day, and there was somebody ahead of me, and I looked over at the candy bars, and the candy bars were $3.50.
Oh.
And I said to the checkout lady, I never thought I would see candy bars for $3.50, and there they are, and the kids come in and go,
Yeah.
"Can I get a candy bar?" Well, there's $3.50 for
it's crazy how much that kind of stuff has gone up in price. We were talking last night with the Searses about it. I remember when I was little, we used to go to my grandmother's for dinner on Sunday. And she lived right in town in Grafton, and there was a pharmacy across the street. And they used to give us a nickel to walk across to the pharmacy and buy candy. And you just thought you were the richest person in the world, because candy was a penny a piece, right? You'd go over and get 5 pieces of candy. And then you walk in the store today, and you know, who would have thought you'd spend $1.50 for a bottle of water, right? 10 years ago. And then, you know, you go in and buy a 20-ounce Coke or whatever, and what is it, $2.50, $3? And I remember when 2 liters used to be 99 cents, right? I mean, it's crazy how expensive stuff is. Yep, there you go. Says, are you using wisdom when making purchase decisions? So do you stop and evaluate things before you make that decision, right? Are you avoiding taking on unnecessary debt, right? Do you have an attitude that I am not going to use my credit card unless I can pay it off at the end of the month? That should be your attitude, right? I mean, it's hard to buy stuff without credit cards now, right? But you should never spend enough or so much that you can't pay it off when that bill comes. I'm pedantic about credit cards. If I charge something today, I will go online and pay it tomorrow. Like, I make 8 payments a month on my credit card. They probably think I'm crazy, but I just can't stand having a balance. It says, are you willing to help someone in need before spending on a want for yourself? We kind of talked through that, right? And then planning. Planning is very important, right? Do we make sure we're budgeting and we know where we're spending our money? Do you have a budget? Right? Pretty basic question. Next one's a big one. Do you follow a budget?
That word budget, it's a spending plan.
Right, right. But do you follow that plan? There's so many people say, well, we have a budget. My wife and I were talking last night, or on the way to the wedding. We talked about it, and we were talking about retirement. And I said, we have to have a family meeting, an adult family meeting. And she's thinking, okay, us and the kids. And I said, no, me and you. And she's like, well, what do we need to talk about? I said, can we actually live on our budget or stick to our budget? She goes, well, yeah. I said, but we haven't, like, for the last 5 years. She's like, well, we haven't had to. I said, well, what's that have to do with it, right? So it's important that we stick to the budget that we have. Do you make good choices when setting your budget, right? Are there wants we have that we consider non-negotiables when we make our budget? So do you sit down and make out your budget and say, well, this is really important to me. We got to keep, spending on going out for dinner or spending on vacation. We have to keep all that stuff, right? And do you sit and go through the budget with your spouse and say, well, these are the things I want, so let's cut the other things. You don't care about what they want, right? But you really shouldn't have non-negotiables. You should sit and think about what are our needs and how should we be spending based on those needs. Saving, this is a big one. And this is something I've stressed to my kids. Eric, I can tell you that, I really push them to save when they're young, right? So it says, pay God first, yourself second, and then everything else. I was having a conversation with a guy that I worked with, and I was mentoring him, and we were talking about finances And he was a Christian. And I said, you know, after paying God, you got to pay yourself first. And he goes, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, you need to save. Oh, he goes, I thought that meant that I should buy everything I wanted. Right? I'm like, no, pay yourself means to save. Right? It says, are you disciplined with your saving? Do you save what's left over? Or do you follow a very strict plan that this is what we're going to save? Do you have an emergency fund, Mark mentioned it, of 4 to 5 months of expenses? Right? If the wheels fell off the bus, would you be okay for a little while? Do you save for large purchases, such as home? And I'm not saying to pay off your home, but to have money to put down for vehicles, for experiences, for education. Do you plan for those kinds of things and start saving money for them early? Preparing for the future. It says, don't live for today at the expense of saving for retirement, right? This is a big deal, right? When you think about, I mean, how many of you want to retire if you haven't already? We all do, right? So we need to plan for that. What's that going to look like for us? It says, are you using the tools available to you to save, right? Do you use a 401k plan, traditional or Roth, or an IRA plan, right? And, you know, if you have it available to you, you should certainly use it, right? Traditional 401k is before tax, right? So whatever you save is not taxed today, it's taxed when you take it out. And your Roth is after-tax money, and the nice thing about a Roth, which I'm surprised they haven't done away with them, is that you take your after-tax money, put it in an investment, and all the growth is tax-free when you take it out, right? So if you put it in $10,000 and it grows to 30, you don't pay tax on that $20,000. They're wonderful, but it's after-tax money, right? And then if you don't have access to 401k, you can always do a personal IRA, right? And there's limits to what we can give. There's also non-qualified investments. That means just investing on your own, right? Non-qualified means non-retirement, by the way the government defines it. But just because you max out an IRA or you don't have access to a 401k doesn't mean you can't save by other vehicles. And you should plan for that and try to do that, right? It's important to understand the power of compounding interest, right? A lot of people don't get this, and it's super, super powerful, right? And what compounding interest means, that if you have, really, oh my goodness, if you have an investment and you keep the interest in there, you're then getting interest on the interest, right? So there's a rule of 72. Anybody ever heard of that? Right? The rule of 72 says if you take 72 and divide the interest rate you're getting on your money into that, that's how many years it takes to double your money. Okay? So if you have 7.2% return on your money, whatever you have in there, without adding anything to it, is going to double in 10 years. So if you have $100,000, in 10 years it's worth $200, 20 it's worth $400, 30 it's worth $800,000. So the earlier you save in your life, look what it's worth. The nominal rate for the last 100 years in the stock market is 10.6% annually. Now that would mean that your investment would double every 7 years, right? For planning purposes, if you want to be a little more conservative and say, I don't want to, risk things as much, if you use about 8.5%, it would take 8.5 years to double. So if a 23-year-old, so you're done with college, you come out, if you make $65,000 a year, and you save 9% of your income. Now, if you have matching, a lot of employers match 401k, and a lot of them do. If you put in 5%, we'll give you 4. It's 100% on the first 3, 50% on the next 2. That's only 5% of what you make. If you do that, and then every year when you get a pay increase, you take 1% of your, so if you get a 3% pay increase, keep 2, take 1 and add it to your 401k, right? At age 35, you will have saved $215,000. If you never put more money into that, right, after that period, at age 43, you have $430,000. 52, you have $860,000. And at 60 and a half, you have $1.7 million. That's the power of compounding interest, right? And we should be teaching our kids this, like beating it into their heads, the importance of this. And Erica knows that I have done that to her and Brett, right? And they have made good choices around this. You know, she just took a buyout. She quit work. She's 35. She'll have $2 or $3 million when she is ready to retire. And she won't put any more money in it. It's really important to understand compounding interest. All right, we'll pick up next week. Thank you.